speak then, which is always the way. Good early evening to everybody that's coming to watch this webinar. For those of you that are new, my name is Leon. I've been hosting these for the last couple of weeks on behalf of the Young Trustees movement. I am the ambassador for Wales. If you would like to ask a question as we go through today's webinar, please type it in the chat. If you are happy to ask your own question, just write the words "I have a question" in the chat, and then I'll bring you in and unmute you. If you would rather me ask the question on your behalf, send me a private message on the chat room. And to do that, you just click the chat box and then change the blue highlighted section from everyone to Leon, and then send it me and I'll read out your question for you. But we're going to get started. This is being recorded too, so if you want to ask your question without your video on, feel free to keep your video off. That's fine. We'll be uploading this to the Young Trustees Movement YouTube channel straight after the call, or tomorrow. It happens pretty quickly, for you to be able to share and look back. But it gives me the absolute great pleasure to welcome Renee Campbell to this webinar. Renee is a new trustee, but I won't say anything more because I will let Renee introduce herself.
Hi, thank you. So, hi everybody, my name is Renee. As Leon said, I'm a new trustee for about a month now. We have a charity called Action Breaks Silence, which I was fortunate enough to connect with via the Young Trustees movement. So I'm 21. This is my first, let's say, adult trustee position. I've been on a youth board of advisors beforehand, but never, legally down as a director of a company per se. I've got about 6 years of experience in the charity sector, domestic and international, particularly with kind of youth opportunities, employment, education, and BAME affairs. Yeah.
Great, thanks Renee. And you're 21, you've been a trustee for a little while. Can you talk to us about the sort of last 6 months and how you found that position, the process that you went through in terms of being recruited onto that board?
Yeah, so I would say my recruitment process was, it was half formal and half informal. So as I said, I was able to meet Deborah from Action Breaks Silence, who is the founder of the charity, via the Young Trustees movement. I connected with her. I answered I believe it was the "where would you like to see yourself in 1 year" question, and a few people responded back to me. I got into quite a great back and forth with Deborah, and she asked me to check out her charity, which offers empathy training as well as self-defense training, because it's a charity against gender-based violence. So that, it lay completely in my lap, because I myself, I hold 2 different black belts in Taekwondo. I was on the British team. I'm a national qualified judge, and I can't think what else, but everything under the sun when it comes to Taekwondo, I guess, and that was all before the age of 18. And then again, my professional work career is strongly with youth. I've done a lot of youth work. First on, I've run empathy and kind of safeguarding classes and stuff myself. So like I said, it was, absolutely perfect for me. So from doing that, she gave me her phone number. I called her, we discussed this, we discussed our amazing synergies. She really liked me. She requested me to send my CV over to her. She shared it with the rest of the board. And then from then, I had like a mini interview with the board a few days later. Well, a few of the UK board members, because her charity operates in 2 countries, but it's existing in India now. It's opening out. So South Africa, England, and then India is starting up. And then, yeah, they liked me too, and they sent the paperwork straight over. I signed, and here I am.
Great. Now, obviously, if we break down your appointment, then there are sort of 2 stages to it. The first stage is the more informal side, which is that you answered a question on the hub. Somebody reached out to you and said, "We would love for you to be a trustee," or "Are you interested in being a trustee? Let's have a chat." Then there's the more formal side, which is then you went through an interview process. And I suppose there will be people watching this who are looking for trusteeships, not without any clue of where to start, which we'll get onto in a moment, of the sorts of websites and areas that you can look for positions. But talk to us a little bit about your conversation with Deborah. How did it go? What sort of questions were you asking and was she asking of you in that initial sort of testing call, if you like, that fielding call where she was checking whether you
Yeah.
were interested and vice versa?
So it was pretty, I'd say it was pretty informal. She's a lovely lady, so it was very nice. The conversation just flowed, but it started with, she kind of explained what Action Break Silence is, what it represents, her role in it, where it started, kind of, she gave her backstory and the reason as to why she created the charity. She really went in depth for me about all the different factions and functions of the charity, and that allowed me to have, well, obviously I had quite a good understanding because, like I said, I went through her webpage, I was looking at the links, but to hear the backstory as well, it really did help me connect, and that's when I realized, okay, I am really invested. So then when the conversation moved on, she kind of said, okay, so are you interested, how does it sound? Because it was more that she was explaining the vision she has for her charity, and if I think I would align with it. Evidently I really did. So then I went on to kind of explain from all the points she raised what I aligned with. So when she was speaking about the empathy training, I spoke about my own experience, what I've done, how I've worked when I used to be a youth worker when I was about 16 myself, the way I've had to counsel people and certain disclosures, just the way in which the system works. And then I was able to also bring up my experience with Taekwondo and the fact that I did that as a kid. And, I've taught in schools, I've taught the martial arts since being a child myself. And just like I said, matching up points from my story with hers and what the charity represents. And that's literally what caused us to realize, okay, this could be a very good partnership. And that's when she requested I send over my CV so she could share it with the board. Oh,
Sorry,
I can't hear you.
I muted myself. Sorry, talk to us about the second half, which was, so you had an interview with some of the other trustees, some of the other board members.
Yes.
How long did it last? What sort of questions did they ask? Were there any tests involved? I'm expecting the answer to that to be no, but it's useful for people to understand what the actual process is like.
Yeah. So it was about 30 minutes long, I would say. There were a few questions, more what do I think I could bring to the board? Where do I see myself aligning? What about the charity spoke to me? In practicality, how would I act in my role as a trustee? Those kind of questions. A lot of them were answered because they already had my CV, so they were able to refer back to it and say, okay, I see on your CV you have experience with this charity and sitting on this board, X, Y, and Z. And it was a lot easier for me to be able to signpost back to them when I was explaining and was having that, the interview. And those were the kind of questions, I guess, your normal interview questions if you were applying for, a role. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was too informal, it was a proper interview. But again, like I said, because they had my CV and they did take the time to read it, it was interesting just being able to post it back. And the actual interview opened with questions about the specific school I attended and such, because one of the trustees had some experience with that organisation, which again, to me, it showed that, okay, they care, they're interested, they've read through my CV, which again gave me more confidence. And just the fact that, okay, they're proper with this.
So if I was to ask you to think about how most people find trusteeships, which actually is the way that you did it, most trustee positions are filled by the friends of people already on the board. So that's sort of the status quo. Now, clearly, the best practice is to pull a pack together to advertise those roles, etc. What would you say are the positives of the experience that you had? And what would you say are the learning points of the experience that you had?
Okay. I would say definitely a positive for me personally was the fact that I didn't know Deborah before, because it helped me remain professional and it helped me be a lot more on the ball, I would say. And another big benefit was the fact that we had the informal conversation first, and I had already seen, and we had already explored our synergies. I knew where I would best help and best fit in. So when I did have the interview process, it was a lot easier for me to explain myself because I knew already what the charity does and how it operates. It wasn't just a vague idea. So I had already decided, wouldn't say so much as decided, but I had already been able to identify my strongest talents and skills and where I would best be able to help them. And I would say my learning opportunity. I would say it's a strange one because obviously it worked in my favor, but a strong learning opportunity was that your personal brand is so important and you are constantly an advert for yourself. I met Deborah through just answering one of the Young Trustee Hub's questions. So it's not as if we had searched each other. It was the fact that she took to the way I responded to my comment, and there was over 40 comments on there at that time. So that.
What did you say? What did you say in your response to the question on the hub?
Ooh. I believe I said something along the lines of, I want to be a young trustee and to, I think, enable more youth opportunities and skills. It was something along that line. Most likely as well, like I said, it is my career, so it is my passion.
And before we get on to, and I'm going to share my screen in a bit with everybody to show you some of the platforms you can use to find trusteeships. But one thing that we've covered in these webinars today is how do young trustees balance being a young trustee with a particular skill set? And I know you're a fundraiser in your day job, is that right?
No, I am head of partnerships and development at my job, yeah.
So head of partnerships and development in your day job, but you mentioned earlier about sort of being the guardian on BAME issues and sort of youth issues. So
yes.
What would be your advice to everybody watching this, most of whom are going to be younger trustees, around balancing those two things? Because you don't want to be appointed for the tokenistic kind of element of representing the community that you are part of. But if that's your way in, then perhaps you just have to take that. But what would you say around balancing those?
I think that's an amazing point you raised. And I think I've got a two-part answer to that. It's one, I am very aware that it is very tokenistic, and in many of the kind of organizations I've worked for, they would always kind of push me towards those roles because I am young and because I am Black. Obviously, they'd like me to represent BAME. However, I work for a BAME charity. It's a Caribbean African educational charity. Now, we're open to all people who come in, but it was originally set up 40 years ago to help and kind of supplement the mainstream education and the gap that Black students tend to miss. So for me, it wasn't so offensive me being asked to do that role, because upon them hiring me onto the board, that was my working title. And a large majority of my career within the kind of political arena and the charity sector has been campaigning for youth skills and development, BAME affairs, diaspora affairs. So in that case, that's what I wanted to do, because like I said, that's what my skill set is most trained to. Obviously things within that, like my role functions, i.e. partnerships and development, you know, when it comes to engagement and stuff, that is a forte of mine. But, you know, it has been applied to the third sector, the charity sector, and it has been applied to kind of youth and BAME affairs on a whole. But that's not to say that I haven't worked in other sectors. I have. But I would say definitely stand your ground, because not in all of the jobs I've taken, I haven't gone for BAME specifically for that reason, to avoid being the token. And the best advice I got was when I went to the Youth Hack, which was run by DFID and Restless Development. And that was, you need to let youth lead. And you wouldn't have a women's advisory board for a charity, so why would you have a youth one? You should let youth be in a leading position. It doesn't make sense. So that's something I would really encourage. Don't feel that just because you're a representative of a demographic, that means you have to be the guardian. This is the kind of flaws and ceilings we're trying to shatter in the day-to-day, and many different movements are about. But if it so happens to be your career, then definitely stand in it with full confidence. But remember, if you are hired onto a board as a young trustee, you are still a trustee. You are hired because of your specific skill set, what's reflective on your CV, what you vocalized and promised that you can deliver. So that's what you want to specialize in. That's the skill set you want to offer. I just so happened to offer these specific skill sets.
So you're a trustee first and young second. I love that.
Definitely.
I'm going to bring in Dan Laws, who's typed in a question, but I'm going to ask them to ask it on camera for you. So Dan, you should be able to speak now. Hi, Dan.
Of course. Hi, everyone. Hi, Renee. Thank you so much for
Hi.
this. Really insightful. As someone who's, like yourself, had a lot of experience in the youth sort of sector and voluntary work and that sort of stuff, I'm moving to sort of look for trustee positions now. And I was just wondering, I actually applied for one today, so I wonder how that will go. But if so I've said here that, you know, Deborah, I'm just reading up my question now. Deborah seems to, but did any of the other board members, I know you might not be able to name them, board members show a little more hesitation at the prospect of appointing a young trustee? If so, how did you combat it? And if not, what sort of advice would you have to anyone who did?
I'm going to have to answer that question in two parts. I would say there was one who was asking the most of the questions. So at the beginning, I wasn't sure whether to interpret that as hesitation to me and what I reflected, or whether that was because I am young. I'm very aware I'm young, and I would have been the only Black board member as well. So I wasn't sure if that would be hesitation to me, or if it was, you know, interest, and that's the protocols of their board. But I did notice that the other board members kind of quieted him down in a way, but then towards the end it kind of came to light that he was just very interested in my CV, and he could connect with a lot of the things I had done and work experience. Even though he was a much older gentleman, he had kind of walked a similar path. He had connections with the school that I studied at, so his deep interest was genuine interest. And I think it's very important for us to keep an open mind, because sometimes when people are, let's say, grinning you, it's actually because they want to know more and they are interested. It's not that they're looking for the fault. And the other half I'd say to the question is, in the current job I'm in, where I'm head of partnerships and development, I, again, the youngest employee there, you know, 21. I'm very, very, very blessed to have been promoted within 4 months of being there, and I'll be head of department. But I think when I was going through the interview process, there was some, because we, again, it's a charity, so we're managed by a board of trustees. Some were a bit hesitant to hire me because of my age, and it was very apparent. But the confidence I carried myself with, and I did have to create a presentation to kind of show what I would do for the centre moving forward, and it was the best. And the biggest thing they told me was, my level of confidence is what shone me out of the crowd. It's what made them want to invest in me, because they could see that I knew what I was doing and I was confident in what I was doing. So in the end, that kind of overturned it. So my biggest advice is the confidence. You have the experience. It doesn't matter if you started at 15 and you have 6 years of experience, or if you started at 35 and you have 6 years of experience. You have 6 years of experience. And a lot of times in this industry, people will tell you, because you're young, your experience it's not as valuable, and that, don't listen to it. I've had CEOs talk to me. I've, you know, done loads of meetings to ask, okay, how can I get ahead? And the best ones will always say, ignore that. Your experience is experience. You know what you're talking about. The right person will see it. And for me, that has happened. It will happen for you.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. There was a second part to your question, which was, what advice do you have for anyone who may face opposition to having appointed a young trustee? I think that the way that I would spin that is always, whenever you join a board, no matter what your skill set patch is, try and ask questions and critique about other areas of the business. So if you are, if your background is like Renee's and I's in the youth sector, and you want to talk about youth issues, then fine. But actually, if you can talk about other things, if you can get your head around the numbers, trustees that understand the finance numbers are often the most powerful trustees, because they understand the complexities of the organisation. And if you can give critique on HR stuff, whatever it happens to be, I think what you have to do is get out of the habit of only talking on things that you know you have expertise on, because sometimes the most simple questions can be the most powerful ones. Have you had your first board meeting yet, Renee? Or are you still?
I have not. Yeah, I'm still waiting on it. I have had a meeting with the whole of the organisation, and I sat through their sessions because they're now virtually training some of their youth ambassadors in South Africa, and some in the UK. They were on a joint meeting, and I met the person who will be flagshipping it for India, but I haven't met all of the board.
And I know Megan Meter will at this point be praising me for asking this, but I think after your board meeting, it would be great if we could get a blog from you for the movement website about your experiences of your first meeting, because there's always something about kind of reflecting on those things. I mean, you've already sort of pulled apart the process of your recruitment, but it would be really interesting, I think, to hear about what happens after your first meeting. I'm going to ask Cassie O'Boyle to come in now, who found a trusteeship on Reach Volunteering, and I'll share my screen for that website as well, and we'll talk you through how to use that website after, for those of you that are watching. Cassie.
Hello. So what are you wanting me to answer, Leon?
Sorry. Talk about Reach Volunteering, the how you found your trusteeship.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I'd use quite a few websites, and I imagine you'll probably talk through some of them as well. But I knew that I wanted to become a trustee. And so just did a bit of digging, and I was on Reach, which, for anyone that hasn't used it, is a platform for people to find volunteers if they're a charity, or to find volunteer positions. The interesting thing about Reach is that it's based on like a skills profile, and so it gives you the opportunity to kind of answer a few questions and like select like lists of skills that apply to you, and then some kind of algorithm send you notifications or information about roles that would directly link to your skill set. So for example, if you were in IT in your day job and you selected that, it then might come up with like IT volunteering opportunities, for example. And you can upload your CV, and it can also integrate with LinkedIn, so there's that kind of connection there. One thing I would say, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, well, hopefully I am, but one thing I would say that I didn't like about Reach's branding is that, like, plastered over their front page is you have to have 3 years of professional experience to like join the platform or to engage with it. And kind of what you were already saying, Renee, is so true. Like, you could have 3 years, but you started when you were 17. And so I think when I first looked on the website, I was a bit put off. I'm 24 now, but I worked in a student union, and so a little bit of me is like, oh, I didn't have a proper job, even though it is, and that's a conversation for another time. But I was really in my first year of just like a normal 9-to-5 job, and so I was really questioning, like, do I have the 3 years experience that mean that I can use this website? And actually thinking like all of the experience that I've developed throughout my life, and I did, and I just used it anyway. So that's just like one thing that I would bear in mind when you go on there. Don't let that put you off, because professional, I think, can sometimes imply that it has to be like in the workforce, but you could have been on a charity board, for example, for 3 years before, and you're looking for your next experience, and that's also professional.
Thanks, Cassie. I'm going to share my screen for Reach now, and then I'll talk through the 3-year bit that you mentioned as well. So Reach Volunteering sell a service to charities. I think they have 2 levels. One is a free version and one is a paid for version to advertise charity trustee roles. You go onto the Reach Volunteering website, press the button at the top which says I want to volunteer, and then all you have to do is type in your postcode if you're not that bothered about kind of trying to filter by your skill set, but you're kind of just interested in doing some research, fill in your postcode and the distance you're willing to travel, and then all of the roles come up, and it's as simple as that, really. It's pretty straightforward. Now, when it says join our community, it does say you need 3 years of experience. If you don't fit that category or think I can't bother to sign up, luckily the advert tells you what the organisation is, so you can just go on that organisation's website. They probably will have their own advert up anyway. You could look at their Twitter, their Facebook page to try and find where else they've advertised. You can also then contact that charity and say, I'm interested in applying for the role. I don't have a Reach Volunteering account. Can I just talk to the chair about the role or receive the application pack? So Reach is a good one because they do charge charities for it, which is why they're probably asking you for 3 years experience, because then they can tell people they're selling their product to, we will only be kind of, you know, sending your stuff to experienced candidates. But the good thing is that, this day and age, you'll be able to probably find that on their social media platforms. So that's how you use reach. Now, traditionally, I would say, when it comes to postcode area, you could tick the mainly at home bit, but everyone is mainly at home now, so I don't think that's relevant anymore. I would argue that most trustee positions will have the mainly at home bit, considering everyone is now running their board meetings online. So that's a really easy website to use. It's pretty just straightforward. As you can see, there's plenty of roles on there, and often is the first point of call for people that want to be trustees. In terms of prepping for your application or for your trustee search, I would say it's worth you shortlisting either the cause that you're interested on working on, or the organisation specifically that you're interested in being a trustee for. Because if you narrow your search, that will help you with your research rather than be overwhelmed with everything that's out there on the web. Now, I want to bring in one of the other ambassadors, which is, who will I go for next? I'm going to go for Amy next, who found their trusteeship through a different way by signing up to a newsletter. So Amy, tell us a bit more.
No, yeah, so I didn't find mine that way, but that's how a lot of people can find it. But so my organisation that I'm a trustee for is Voluntary Action Sheffield. So it's a membership organisation. And basically you can go on their website, click like I want to volunteer. There's a bunch of different options, like are you interested in accountancy? And there's a section that says trusteeship and committees. Click that and it'll bring up a bunch in the area. So I think that one looks at like Sheffield City region. But there's a website called the National Association for Voluntary and Community Action, and they will have members all over England. So I just looked earlier, there's none in Scotland and none in Wales. But if you're in England, you can look at it. There'll be one in your area for certain, looking at the amount that are on there. And all of those have that kind of website where you can go, I'm interested in trusteeship, and it'll bring up a bunch. But yeah.
Great, thanks. And I've just posted the NAVCA website in the chat for people. There is a second thing that you can do in your local area, and I'll just show you an example that I pulled up, which was, I just Googled, I'm not from Northamptonshire, I live in Cardiff. I've never lived in Northamptonshire, but I just thought it was the first area that came to my mind. If you just Google volunteering in and then wherever you live, you will find that most councils or most volunteering centres will have their own bespoke volunteering advertising platform where you can just find roles in your local area. So if you are obviously lots of these will be just kind of hands-on volunteering as opposed to trusteeship, but most of them will have ways in the advanced filter here to be able to pull up trustee opportunities. But if you Google your town, city, area, and then add the word volunteering centre at the end, you'll be able to find your local hub of voluntary activity, so that you'll be able to sign up for the sorts of newsletters and organisation sort of networks that are out there. Also, lots of them do have local volunteering groups on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and in November, when Trustee Week happens, if you're looking for trusteeship, November's a really good time to get involved with the hashtag Trustees Week, because lots of organisations volunteer on there. Sorry, lots of organisations advertise their volunteering on Twitter through that platform as well. And the hub, the Young Trustees Movement Hub, is getting opportunities every week. And I think the team behind it, so Meg and Mita, are working out how best to sort of filter those opportunities and make sure that they reach people correctly, because we don't want the hub necessarily to just be a job board, because there's plenty of job boards out there, and we don't want the majority of the content to be that. But just keep an eye on what's going on the hub as well. Now I'm going to bring in Anthony to talk about their experience of becoming a trustee, because he volunteered in a different capacity first. Anthony, I'm going to mute you. You can turn on your camera if you want to as well.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. So my name's Anthony. I first became a trustee when I was 20, and while I was still at university. And my trusteeship came about because I got to university, wanted to do something good, looked for volunteering opportunities within the university, and it was actually the first thing on the top of your Northamptonshire list. I became a one-on-one befriender with people with children under the age of 12 who had some form of disadvantage in their life. The charity that I work with is Cambridge Student Community Action. And interestingly, the charity sits in a nice kind of sphere where it is a student society as well as a registered charity. So it kind of has kind of a foot in both of those arenas. I was a volunteer for 2 years, and there are kind of progression opportunities within the charity to take on more kind of ownership or leadership. And they have a committee, kind of a president, vice president, publicity officer, etc. And in my final year, I applied to be president through proper application process, and then had to kind of give a speech at our AGM, and then was voted in by majority as the student president. And alongside being student president, the vice president and treasurer on that committee also sit as full trustees of the charity on the trustee board to make sure that the student voice and the young people's voice in the organisation is really well heard and sits on that board. And that's for a year while you hold that position. And the trustees in the organisation have a really good board culture in making that really accessible for everybody. So it is worth, if you're thinking, and we've covered this in a few previous kind of webinars, thinking about actually a good way to think about getting a trusteeship is thinking about the causes that really mean a lot to you. And for me, the work that we were doing in the community was a lot for me. And I wanted to go out and volunteer and do something. And actually it was through that volunteering, I realized that there are more opportunities for me to do something on a different level. And that was sitting on the steering group. And there might be organizations out there that you care about that have an advisory group or a steering group or some form of kind of committee that isn't necessarily on the trustee board, where you can learn more about that and find out through a different arena. Then when I stepped down from that board, I was then approached again by the charity to say, we're recruiting for trustees. Would you be interested in applying again to sit on the board? And interestingly, I actually said no 3 times when they asked me to do that, because I said I had no skills to offer. And it's really interesting what you were saying earlier on, Renee, about kind of having the skills and that confidence, because at that point, I didn't necessarily have the confidence to believe that the skills I had because I felt that the young person's voice was already represented by those other 3 young trustees on the board, which was really interesting. And I just graduated, I started my career, I work in marketing, and I was like, I have nothing else to give. But I went along to a committee meeting just to sit and observe. And as they were talking through things, I was like, okay, I have so much that I want to comment on and critique and understand things. So I came onto the board as a young trustee, but there were other young trustees on the board. So I very much nobody focused on me as being young. I very much was a trustee first.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Anthony. Renee, we've had a question through that has been sent to me on the private messages, which is, and I think it comes off the back of what you were saying about your skills. So I'll read out the comment. It says, charities often ask for specific skills such as fundraising or marketing. And whilst I have some experience, it's not loads. How would you advise applying for these roles when there are potentially older people with years more experience also applying? What would you say?
I would actually say that the ending of that is a key point. There's older people with years more of experience applying, so it doesn't make sense to be fighting the same battle. You as a younger person, you have a different set of skills. At the end of the day, you were brought up in this modern world, you have a different kind of technological understanding, and that's not to say that elder people who are advanced in IT, let's say, there as a profession, that they don't, but you need to address your personal skill set. When I was applying for the trusteeship with Deborah, I identified the fact that her charity focused on martial arts and it also focused on empathy training. Now my day-to-day job is, well, like I said, I'm head of partnerships and development, but it's, it's been campaigning, my experience has been campaigning, education, employment, advocacy. But I saw that in my personal life, my martial arts experience and my experience from working as youth advisor, working as a youth worker, lent so strongly into the charity that that's what I went in with, and that's what I really explained, and that's what led me to actually get in the role. But had I gone in talking about my engagement skills and such when I was discussing on the phone to her, I probably wouldn't have even been asked for a CV. So I wouldn't advise you go in for what necessarily you believe most companies are asking for. If you're passionate about the organization, there's a reason why. Show them why and show them the skills that back that up.
And I think I would add to that by saying that skill set is only one element of what you bring to a board. There is also perspective, and there is real value in the diversity of perspective as well as the diversity of skill set. I think if you are at a certain stage in your career, which is what I'm gathering from the question, which is that this person is earlier on in their career, then I would say that probably affects the sort of stage and age of the charity that you might apply for. The reality is most people are not going to be on the board of Save the Children in 3 weeks' time just because you've joined the Young Trustees Hub and taken part in these webinars. But, you know, there's 184,000 registered charities in England and Wales doing awesome things in our local communities that require people with your level of skill set, because that is way more advanced than anyone else around that particular board table. Okay, it's not as, you're not at the stage of some of the greats and the goods that are already sitting around those top 10 charity boards, but there are still therefore another 183,990 charities still left to be able to pitch for. And I think when you start doing your research, you'll realize that every charity is in a different stage and the sorts of experience they're looking for differ too. Now, I wanted to show everybody another platform that you can look for trusteeship on, which is Do It. doit.org is a national volunteering platform. I would like to reiterate what Anthony said as well around finding a volunteer role first, because you can develop those skills that you might not have had the chance to use in your day job yet. Similarly, it's the same as Reach in effect, i.e. you go on the search, do an advanced search, and you include the word trustees, but these are the sorts of ones that are around near me in Cardiff. I increased the mileage to 50 miles because, again, currently you will probably be able to do some of this from home, and yes, that might be another argument that you have to have with the charity, but they're really it's a really easy website to use. As I say, you can do it by postcode, you can read the adverts, it tells you what they're looking for. We're particularly interested in potential trustees who have experience in either education for young people, additional needs, or in marketing communications. One thing I would say about trustee adverts that you have to keep your eye out on is that often they will say, like this one here, skills required. Often organizations will use the word and when they mean or. So they will say marketing skills and HR skills and governance skills and leadership skills and finance skills, when actually they tend to mean or. So marketing skills or child protection skills or HR skills. So if you read an advert that is poorly written, don't necessarily let that put you off. I think it tells you a lot about the charity and where they're at, but just interrogate that a bit further with your with the named contact, if there is a named contact. If there isn't a named contact, still, like it says here, register your interest, or go on their website and find a contact to get in touch with and say, I've just seen your trustee advert, I'm really interested in potentially applying. Could I potentially speak to somebody about what the role entails, or about the skills you're really looking for, or actually I'm not quite sure I meet the person spec, but I do offer these skills. Would that be of interest to you, either on your board in a different way of volunteering? And that is doing what Renee did in terms of having that sounding board chat to begin with Deborah, right?
Yes.
With Deborah, and just testing fit. And again, like Anthony said, volunteering for an organisation is a really good way of checking out whether or not you are right for that organisation and they are right for you. And the last tip that I have for you all, and don't worry if you're trying to scribble down all of these web links, we will post a cheat sheet which includes all of these. And I think in the future as well, we'll probably do a more broadcast webinar around how to find trusteeship and how to approach it. But if you go on the Getting On Board website, you can subscribe to their newsletter. And I'm a trainer for Getting On Board, so I know this better than the rest. But if you add in your details here, tick what you're looking for, and you will get a monthly newsletter of adverts, live adverts. and because they know getting on board, lots of them will have been on our training, and so will be very aware of board diversity and are probably a bit further along than some organisations in terms of thinking about young trustees. So that's the kind of last tip that I would give you. But to cover everything that we've sort of been through in terms of where to look, just as a quick reminder, you've got doit.org, Reach Volunteering, your local CVCs. You can find those just by Googling your area and the word CVC, or volunteering in and wherever you live. You can look at community magazines and newspapers. There's Charity Job as well, which I haven't covered. Many of you will have looked at Charity Job because everyone's heard of Charity Job. Again, it's another job board, but you can advertise for trusteeship for free on there. So there are some adverts that are out there. There are lots of other websites out there. Use Google to your advantage, because that will help you start to work out where organisations in your local community advertise. If you're in a college or a university, then your students' union or student volunteering team might have some tips on where to look as well in your university area, especially if you're a first year and you're going to spend in the next 3 years in a very particular city or town. It's quite a good thing to do to get involved and embedded in your local community. A tip for you, and Renee, I'm going to ask you about this as well. If you are at a particular fluid time in your life, let's say you are, you're in your first year of university, and actually you know you're going to leave in a year, then trusteeship's probably not right for you at that time. I think be open, honest, and upfront with any organisation you're talking to about your term of service that you could potentially do, because in my experience, chairs and trustees don't typically like surprises, and they hate it when trustees dip off after a year because they have to go through trustee recruitment again, which takes time. How long have you agreed to sign up for with your organisation, Renee? Have you gotten that far, or have you just sort of...
Yeah, no, we did not discuss a time frame.
Okay.
How I see it, I would hope it's going to be for the foreseeable future unless something came up on other sides. But we did discuss that. There was a young trustee before me who had to dip off, I think, within the first month or something because her circumstances changed. She might have had to leave the country or something. Right. Or she got overwhelmed. I just remember there was something that restricted her. It was out of her control. But yeah.
And have you had an induction? Yeah.
I guess you could say the call that I had with the whole company and, you know, actually meeting all the young ambassadors and stuff, I would say that would have been my induction.
Okay, great. And I'm going to just ask for any remaining questions that people have. This is your time to answer them. As I say, 7 a.m. tomorrow in the resources section of the Hub, we'll post all the links to the websites that we've mentioned and more, so you'll have even more things to look at. Next week's topic is how to know if a trusteeship is right for you. And Anthony's going to be the guest for that, who you heard from earlier, and I think gave you a little bit of a flavour of the sorts of things that we're going to talk about around sense checking with an organisation, whether it's right for you or not. And as he said, at that kind of time and stage of your life, because there might be a trusteeship which right now isn't right for you, but in a year's time very well might be. I haven't seen any more questions come through. This will be uploaded tomorrow too, so you can come back and look through all of it and look through the very, very mini show and tell that I did. And we will probably pull together a broadcast style webinar around how to look for trusteeship in the future. Otherwise, thank you very much. Renee, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything you wanted to say before we end the call?
I guess the only thing I would say is just message people, just email and reach out, even if you see a company or a charity that you're really interested in that's not advertising for trusteeship, but you really would like to get more involved, email them, because you never know, they could be in the process, or you might spark an idea that they didn't have, and the fact that you're offering a young and a youth skill set, they might create the position just for you. So yeah, just try, stay open.
Great, thank you. And we'll end on that note. Thanks very much, everybody. And
thank you.